wanted to come up with a construct that explained politically, sociologically, where gay people existed in the world as we know it. But I began to think about what we talk about as the first world, which is the United States and what we call the free nations of the West. And the second world, which was the former Soviet Union and the Soviet bloc countries. And the third world, which includes the developing countries all over the planet. And I had read in the early 60s about the Fourth World movement, and the Fourth World includes people like American Indians, the Welsh, the Kurds, people who say that they have a homeland, a tribal national space that they come from and that they belong to, that belongs to them, that isn't recognized by the larger nation that they live in. I didn't invent 1 through 4, but I came up with trying to place other people in a construct with an idea of what I call the fifth world. The fifth world includes people that live all over the planet, scattered away from their native homeland, and yet who are still recognized as people. For instance, gypsies, Jews, African Americans, anyone that lives scattered from any part of the planet, anywhere else, living in communities where information is passed from parents to children in stories and art and history and culture. Then I felt floating on top of it was what I decided was the sixth world. And the sixth world are people who are not biological kin in the way that 1 through 5 are. Information isn't passed from parents to children. But people in the sixth world have shared language, shared history, shared culture, shared vision, and a shared piece of the archetypal pattern of the great mosaic of what it means to be a piece of all humanity. My sense is that the 4 major people in the sixth world are the deaf nation, the blind nation, the lesbian nation, and the gay nation. That all of us occupy different positions in the world, in the globe, in the community. We come from families, we're born out of families for the most part that live in the first, second, third, fourth, fifth worlds. But we exist as our own people. And anywhere that you go in the world, you recognize a kinship with another gay man. The same way that blind people all over the planet recognize we are a people. That deaf people recognize we have a language, we are a people, we have a shared history.
From them, and that's the message we want to bring.
We've done an amazing thing since 1969, you know, the Stonewall riots and all that. We've done an amazing thing, but you know, there's much work to be done.
When I was coming out in the early 70s in Berkeley, California, there were no elders to share information with, to teach. We were all inventing a new culture for ourselves from the bottom up. And even the older men in the community were men that I knew who were coming out. They may have been married, they may have not been married. They were coming out at the same point of consciousness that I was.
The gay men that I met really were very self-destructive, very self-abasing.
I, as a gay male, do not live in a society that has given me appropriate role models. So I feel as though it's of the utmost importance that I be personally aware of how I act, think, live, interact with others, my motivators for sexual interaction, what have you, because in this society they've given me no positive role models, nothing to base, you know, healthy sense of self-esteem and self-worth on.
We believed what people said about us. We had become the stereotypes that we were warned about, and I didn't know another gay couple. So again, we were making it up from scratch. There's a quote from Paul Goodman, I don't think I said this before, but this was sort of my motto at the time, and it's from a book that he had written called Making Do, and the quote is, "If there is no community for you, young man, make one yourself."
I had no models, and the models provided me by the non-gay culture were not what I came to understand was the truth about me.
When I came out, there really wasn't anyone there to tell me what being gay really meant, except heterosexual society, which said that being gay meant you were outside of that group and everything that went with that. And that's how I interpreted that. There was no one there to say, you can meet a man and fall in love and have a relationship that endures.
We, in a sense, are also responsible for disenfranchising our own elders, for having this incredible ageist perception of youth and beauty. And that's very sad, because there are men who are sitting out there with incredible wisdom, older men who have lived through amazing changes in history, have come from a period where they were incredibly closeted to a time where it may not be completely safe to walk down the street and hold your beloved's hand, but it's very different than it was 30 years ago. And we're not talking to them because we see them as old and decrepit and left out of this culture. And what I'm hoping happens is that we really evolve a culture that honors our elders, that honors the whole journey, because otherwise there's a great sadness in coming here and knowing that the older that you get, the less that you're valued.
My vision is that there is a time when never again is there a boy who loves boys or a girl who loves girls that grows up in pain, in fear and confusion and doubt and denial and self-disgust or self-loathing. That we will come into a world where we may be different than our parents, and I think we will always, I think if the statistics are true, there'll always be 9 of them to 1 of us. That's how it is, and I think how it will always be. But I see a world where we are honored again and respected for our sameness and our differentness.
I have a hope that the gay men of my generation will be there for the next generation in a way that those before us couldn't be.
Lake Ontario there was a bathhouse where men went to change into their bathing trunks, and I remember the fascination with watching naked men getting out of their underwear and putting on their swimming trunks. Just a feeling of warmth and fascination and bliss just from looking. And that was at age 5 or 6 or 7.
It seems like I always knew I was different. The first memory I have of really knowing that consciously is when I was 5, I think. My father, the band director, took me to the locker room after a football game at the high school. I saw the men in the shower. But I knew something was there, one, that I shouldn't tell to anybody else, and that I was very different.
When I was 5 years old, my parents took me to the Ice Follies in Minneapolis, and I remember sitting there and watching this dance that was done by a man and a woman who started out in formal wear, and as they danced, it was a comic thing, and their clothes started to fall off. And I remember that as the man's shirt came off, I got an erection. And I didn't really know what it was, but it was this electrical feeling between my legs, and my little penis got hard, and I knew that there was something going on there that was very powerful.
I had this dream where I was in a tunnel of love. I was emerging from a tunnel of love with my grandfather, with my arms wrapped around him and his arms around me, and we were kissing. And I remember waking up and thinking, I'm homosexual. I know what this means, I'm homosexual. I was a very precocious 10-year-old. And I knew from that moment on, there was never any doubt. There was never really a slow process of uncovering for me. It was like a light switch flipping.
When I was 9, I was attracted to a classmate of mine, and I realized that wasn't okay.
7, 8. I think I was probably 3 years old.
2.5, 3 years old. I knew as a small boy that when I was 8 and fell in love with a good humor man.
When I first came out, I sort of had this rule, well, everything they told me up until now is sort of backwards. And I think when I came out, I was already being what I always considered the worst I could be, queer, gay. or whatever the other words were that I was thinking then. And once I was that, I realized, well, and they tell you these people are the enemy, and maybe that's wrong, and so once I could question that fundamental basis of, say, masculinity or male identity, then it seems like I could question anything.
You know, there were kind of little clues that somebody was gay. For instance, After Dark magazine, which is thankfully no longer published, you know, it should have been called the Journal of Closet Queens, because it would have, you know, the standard two things that every gay man, you know, was interested in. It would have pictures of almost naked male dancers, you know, artfully posed, and it would have usually an interview or two with an aging movie star or an opera diva. If you saw one of those on somebody's coffee table, and they had a lot of candles around, you know, that was a good sign that they were a member of the family.
When I first truly came out as gay, it was coming out into a sexual subculture, especially in New York City, 1974-5. And coming out into a sexual subculture was a place where sex was celebrated.
The first time I marched in a march up Fifth Avenue, and I saw all these people who were gay and lesbian, and the little boy in me who really felt that he was the only one, you know, like living in Orange County, California, the only person. So marching down and seeing all those people, that really was a very powerful event, because I realized, well, we are everywhere. I'm not the only one. I wasn't the only one.
I use gay.
This week I use queer.
Gay.
Faggot, queer.
Sometimes if I'm feeling playful, I'll call myself a queen.
I like men who love men, but I usually use gay.
I'm a man who loves men who loves men. Lover, warrior, truth seeker.
Stiffs, straight identified faggots.
Radical fairy, faggot, duchess, Dutch for short.
My most favorite word is Uranian. Remember Uranian? That was popular in the 19th century. That to me has class. It has roots. It's a pseudo-ancient Greek word. I like Uranian.
Being gay is a very integral part of my life, and I, for many years, tried not to let it be, so that I could be more like my family wanted me to be.
I have one younger brother who is also gay. We're the only two children in the family, so my parents are not going to have any grandchildren.
Yeah, they wanted the 2.3 kids in the station wagon and the dog.
Settling down in or around the hometown that my parents and brothers and sisters live in, marrying, having 2 children, a station wagon with fake wood on the side.
One of the things that I've been doing in the past several years in traveling is connecting with gay families in other locations and seeing how they do it in Java or Venezuela or Japan. And in a lot of ways it's the same. There's a world in which you cannot safely be yourself all the time. There's a need for sanctuary. There's a need to be with people of like kind, and most of us don't have people of like kind in our biological families.
I didn't know any other, well, I guess I knew one gay
You knew
couple.
one gay couple. I didn't know any gay couples, because I came out in a totally straight environment. You know, I decided I was gay and dealt with it, but it was with straight people. It was with straight friends, and so I didn't have any role model to work with, and most of my straight couple role models were kind of countercultural.
Part of our internalized homophobia is that we look at our relationships through the lens of what heterosexual people have been told to do and have evidently needed to do to participate in the broader society.
I think that's one thing we both feel real strongly about, is that we're not married. You know, we're in a committed relationship, but we're not married.
John Boswell, who's an amazing archaeologist of all of this sort of lore, talks about the Catholic Church setting up the nuclear family back around the time of the Inquisition because they needed to organize their parishes socially. They needed to, you know, they had this whole hierarchy, and they needed these little units at the bottom of the hierarchy to make up, you know, the foundation of it. And so they organized from the top down. And that's been the model. Romantic, monogamous love has been, you know, we've said, oh, well, this is obviously, you know, the highest form. Well, it was created by the Catholic Church as a way of controlling the population.
We met in church. We really did, yes.
I guess it was September 15th, 1979, huh? We've been together about 12 and a half years now.
We got together New Year's Day and stuck.
And still here.
8 years later.
How many years?
8.
8 years, 2 months, and 16 days, actually. Very easy when you go from the first of the year.
I do the laundry and Jerry does the cooking. I do most of the cleaning, and Jerry does the home fix-up.
The butch stuff is what I do.
It's not that different from a straight relationship, except that I think that we don't have the role playing so much. One of us isn't the woman and one isn't the man. So we don't have all these roles that we get into, although we've sort of divided things of what we do. He cleans, I do the laundry. I cook, he eats.
He wires the electric, I pick the colors.
It works.
We talk a lot. We take a lot of long walks and talk about life and living together and, you know, and renovating the kitchen and where we're going on trips and how my work's going or his work's going. And I think we're each other's own best therapist. We saved a fortune in therapy. But we make it up by going out to eat a lot.
Finding one person, the right person, the only person who exists out there, you know, and creating this life with that person that lasts forever, and that you judge it based on whether or not you ever sleep with anybody else, and you base it whether or not you stay together for long periods of time. And that seems to be the criterion, of course, in having happy children. I guess for gay men that means having a stylish home, having well-behaved pets, whatever. But at any rate, it doesn't work for me.
We don't have the option of staying together for the kids. Staying together for the mortgage sounds a little bit crass. So the only thing that keeps us together really is loving one another.
How I love happens to be different from the way that the majority of people love, but it is no less valid, and I have no less right to it than they do, and I'm sure of that. I can talk about how gay men have responded to AIDS, and I think that's been truly remarkable. The thing that is the irony here, and I've been out, you know, for 20 years, and so I can remember that hearing this statement said, you know, innumerable times, and that is that I don't want to live past 30. You know, gay men would say that a lot in the 70s. Gay life is over at 30. I don't want to live past 30. You're old and tired past 30. You know, and so that echo, the echo of that statement, that sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, haunts me.
AIDS is a disease of my particular family, erotic beings, gay men. Certainly, there's in Africa it's more heterosexual, and in you know, it's intravenous drug, but that part of it, it's a particular disease of my family, and my people are dying.
Maybe I would feel differently if our government were responding, if the medical establishment were responding in ethical and proactive ways, but they're not.
HIV is not a gay disease. In Central Africa, it's killed off hundreds of thousands of people. HIV, too, is very prevalent in the United States. Cases of leukemia, which is the opportunistic infection of HIV, too, are running rampant in the United States in the last 5 years, to the point that it's beginning to appear in the news on a regular basis. The heterosexuals are being eat up with this, too. However, they're turning their backs thinking it's a gay disease, and it's not.
This great rage that AIDS happened just at a point where it really seemed like we were beginning as gay and lesbian people to be accepted a little bit, to not be so marginal. Suddenly there's this whole new thing that happened, and that to me was the most difficult thing. There were moments where I thought, well, maybe God really doesn't like us. And even though, I could say, this is a virus, this is about a disease, this is not about morality. I think that's been the hardest part, this terrible feeling about how that looks in the world, that we are a people, gay equals AIDS, AIDS equals gay. And that's been really difficult for me on that level, and also on the level that I feel like I grew up in a time and came out in a climate where it was just so painfully difficult for me to accept my gayness as, nice Jewish boys who are supposed to get married and have children. And that was really painful. And for me to watch a whole new generation of young men growing up who have a certain positive sense about their gayness, but now have not the sense that they might be evil or sick, but the sense that what it means to come out is about dying, that to me is so incredibly painfully tragic.
Watching people that I love and have known with affection fade away and leave.
I'm learning to say goodbye.
I expect to lose a lover in the near future to AIDS. I expect to have to deal with that. I expect it's going to make me stronger. It's going to hurt a lot. I was very much intrigued by, I think it was what James Broughton said about that the love that we're showing to the dying we need to show to those who are living.
Personally, on another level, was seeing gay culture change so rapidly. Someone here was talking about the flowering of gay male culture in the 70s, and not a withering, but a retrenchment, a turning within, taking care of our own in the 80s that I think was necessary, but it's not what I would have chosen for us as a people.
Our culture was peaking at that point. Gay pride was really moving, the fairies were moving, women were organizing their own culture, lesbian culture was just, that was the time when Holly Near and Chris Williamson and Meg Christian, Sweet Honey in the Rock were all of that was coming up. And hundreds of thousands were marching in pride marches in San Francisco and New York. We were really, moving in a very fast kind of way. There was also what's called a candy store mentality of all of a sudden, not only is the fruit not forbidden, but it is everywhere. And the great permission at the time was, you should have sex with as many men as often as possible.
I don't just have a natural inclination to be promiscuous, but I would have really liked the opportunity to explore promiscuity from the point of stretching my personal boundaries rather than just falling back into the monogamy that felt comfortable and socially programmed.
Back when AIDS was just being discovered and this wave of terror was sweeping through the gay community, a lot of us did the bargaining thing out of Kubler-Ross's stages of grief because we'd lost our candy store. The candy was poison, or at least some of the candy was poison, and we didn't know which candy was poison. And so how in the world did you deal with that? I think that part of what has happened among gay men as we have come to value our lives and fight for our lives, individually and collectively, is that we've started treating each other less and less as objects. And I think that that's part of the way that psychologically we're changing as a result of AIDS, and I do think that that's positive.
It has caused me to challenge how much I can remain a private gay person or private about my gayness or stay in the closet. I'm a very private person generally. So when some of my brothers and sisters in the gay lesbian community talk about all of us needing to be out more, I have a struggle about that. I see the value of that, but I have to measure that for myself. I'm a fairly private person. But the AIDS epidemic has caused me, I've come to a decision point to say that when I am in a crowd of people, or a group of people, and even gays and lesbians who are sharing inaccurate information about the virus and the disease, I want to speak to that.
It has made me change a lot about my own health and how I care for myself and how I think about myself. I've learned to really, I don't know, being that close to death, you learn every moment is wonderful and every day is wonderful, and so that's made a lot of difference in the way I go from day to day.
When you are past your generative stage, you know, where life starts dropping away from you, you know, that you've moved through all of your developmental stages, you know who you are, you've established your personality, you have established your ability to be intimate, you have established your ability to make a contribution to your community, and slowly but surely your powers diminish, you know, as you age. And one of the things that comes with that is wisdom. And this is supposed to happen to you in your 60s. And what I see happening to gay men in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s is that because of what we've had to deal with, the losses and the pain, that we're getting to wisdom a lot quicker.
One of our most ancient roles as gay people was being what I call midwives for the dying. I see the opening door to life as being guarded by women and the closing door to life being guarded by men. But we as gay men had a particular job because we were shamans, we were wandering back and forth between worlds, because we stand between genders, because we stand between worlds. When someone was dying, someone from our tribe was summoned to be there, to look ahead, to say, when you get to the other side, this is who will meet you, this is what it will be like, everything will be okay. I will wander with you to the first portal, and then I will leave you in the hands of your guardians, and they will carry you on the journey. This is what we did 10,000 years ago, and every time I go into a nursing home or a hospital, I see there are male nurses who are gay men who are doing the same job, holding someone's hand and helping them to cross the border into the next territory after they've died. No one talks about this as part of our power as gay men, and yet we do it, and we continue to do it, and we do it privately, we do it in families. When all the other children have grown up and gone away, it's the gay son that stays home to take care of mommy and daddy and not marry and not have a life. But as we step back into our power, I think we come to remember that this is our job.
I think when we're young, that death is, it's not real to us, you know? And anybody who lives life as though they will not die, you know, basically that's foolishness. That's the fool. And that's where we all start, you know. We can't entertain that notion very seriously. Or it interferes with the other things that we need to do. And so we think when we're young we'll live forever. We find out that we won't. And wisdom really is coming to terms with that.
All of my friends, lovers, strangers who I've been with, who've been sick and dying and died in my presence, I in their presence, have taught me that this is the most important transition. And I've been around to people, namely my parents, the people I grew up with, Roman Catholic Church, that I think is in great denial of death. This is a denial of death culture. All I needed to do was see one man die fearlessly, and I knew that's how I want to go. I'll have what he's having.
You're not really a culture until you take care of your brothers from cradle to grave. And I've done that. You know, I've essentially initiated young faggots into a sense of themselves as being part of a people, us people. And I've walked with my lover and a couple of friends up to the last breath they took in their bodies before they went on to their next lives. So I feel like it's a real rounding out, a maturing experience. But God, my heart is just broken by this.
If I had a magic wand, I'd make it all go away. But I don't. And I have to accept the reality of a plague in my lifetime and the reality of friends and loved ones being infected and the reality of their death and my loss. I have to accept that. I have no other choice. And so whatever comes out of it in terms of my growth or our growth in the community, well, okay.
And there are times when it's very attractive for me to sit down with, a bag of Doritos and the television set and just veg out, hang out with Arsenio, have some good time and not think about, it's taking a break, it's pacing. But it's not what I thought I'd be doing at this point in my life.
I am much more comfortable with my mortality than I would assume most people in their mid-30s are from previous generations. I don't think that's just me. I think that's probably most of us within the gay community. I think all of us have developed a much greater awareness of mortality and what's important. It's completely changed my priorities in a good way.
What does it mean to be queer in the age of AIDS? What's it going to mean for us after AIDS goes away? Once we get this thing, lassoed in, corralled, vaccinated against, where are we going to be? Because pre-AIDS, a lot of gay community was about, the men's community wasn't really about sexual abandon for me. It was a celebration of our sexuality. And now it's a celebration of our humanity in some difficult ways. Well, how do we take that down the road?
From the end of the Ice Ages on, there were tribes of gay men who lived in semi-permanent encampments and lived, learned, taught together. From the time that a child was conceived, mothers and fathers were very sensitive as to who was coming in. And in the Ice Ages, parents knew that they were going to have what we would call a gay child. When a child was weaned, its parents turned it over with great ceremony to the men who loved men, who would raise it in their permanent encampments. And in a sense, to have a gay child in your family was exactly the same as it is now to have a doctor in your family, or a lawyer, or a senator, or a congressperson. It gave you clout. It gave you influence in the whole tribe. You could say, oh, this is my son, the gay man, who lives in this encampment and wanders all over and heals people. And there were several very particular functions that gay men had that no other people had. For instance, we were the guardians of the trees. And trees are interesting in that about 90% of the trees are androgynous. They carry both male and female fruit and male and female parts. And only 10% of the trees are particularly male trees and female trees. And this is sort of the inverse of how people are. 90% of the people are pretty much heterosexual, and there are only 10% of us that are somewhat androgynous. So there was felt to be an affinity between how men who loved men were and how trees were. The androgynous nature of trees was similar to our nature. So we were considered the guardians of the trees. When people wanted to use wood, they came to us. When people came upon new areas of trees or new kinds of trees, we were the ones that went in and spoke to the tree spirits, worked with the tree spirits, worked with the plant spirits to communicate with them about what information they carried that could be used by people. Another one of our jobs, and this is something that all of the Sixth World people have, is that we were consciousness scouts. and each people wandered in a different direction. So lesbians went wandering in the world of gender information in a very different way than gay men did, but we have that in common. So that blind people and deaf people explored sensory perception of the physical world in a very different way than gay men and lesbians do.
Having to deal with coming out was a matter of dealing with the idea that reality and the terms that our society uses to define reality are arbitrary concepts, which starts out being very traumatic and ended up being a blessing. Every day I thank, whatever God is up there more and more that I was forced into that, because now I understand that things that most people take for granted, whether they like it or dislike it, they feel they have no choice. I know that I do have a choice to define my life and who I am in terms of what I want and what feels comfortable, as opposed to what is supposed to be.
I feel like a lot of us are here as healers in the sense of being pioneers for the consciousness of the community, the larger community, of being integrators who integrate things into how community develops, and of mixing it up a little bit.
In ancient times and in indigenous societies all over the planet, gay people had a very clear spiritual role. Because we stand between male and female, because we stand between the living and the dead, we have access to information that other people don't have. And how that spiritual role was defined varied from culture to culture. So you can see in the monotheistic world of the West that our spiritual role was one of the outlaw, the heretic, and the forbidden person. And you can see amongst the Navajo that we were considered sacred, and they felt that the survival of the world and culture was dependent upon our Western world priesthood. So we have, as intermediaries, many different options, but what's really interesting to me is not only does the rest of the world not perceive us as spiritual beings, but we often forget that we have a very clear spiritual role. And I think that part of the awakening that's happening in this decade and in this time is that we are remembering that we have a true spiritual role. And if you look at the priesthoods in so many different religions, there's an incredibly large percentage of gay men who are priests. I think what's happening is that some piece of us remembers that we are spiritual people, and we look out in the world, and the thing that most closely approximates what we are is to be a priest, to be a minister, to serve in some deep way. And so I think we keep being attracted to those professions because they mirror back the best possible available mirror that we've had about what is our true nature. As we were wandering in consciousness, there were pieces of information in the spectrum of consciousness that we had a great affinity for, and you see this all through history. Music, art, sculpture, language, poetry, drama are things that we have always done in every culture that we appear in all over the planet. If a play is happening, you know that gay men are going to find it if they haven't created it to begin with. If music is happening, we will be there. If art is happening, we will be there. If people are playing with different colors, textures, fibers, arrangements of shapes, we'll be there. If structures are being built, we will be there. There's a sense in our scouting of knowing about proportions, knowing about arrangement, knowing about texture, tone, feeling. And we have this sense heightened. It's part of the nature of who we are.
I was very much in love with cave paintings. Lascaux, Altamira, and so was my father. It was something that we were fascinated with, this extraordinary, 30,000-year-old brilliant genius art. And what that did to my head, thinking about primitive people are supposed to do like, just little stick figures, and instead they're doing some of the most sophisticated art ever done on the planet, 30, 40,000 years ago. My father said, I think it was probably the fags, because all the other guys were off like hunting or killing people, and who were the guys like home, like just sitting around saying, God, this cave is really ugly, let's do something with the walls.
The energy of the warrior is appropriate and necessary for us, I think, to own and to absorb. And certainly AIDS has forced us to become warriors. And even if we look at the original uprising at Stonewall, it was drag queens who were throwing bottles, who were standing up, who were coming into this balanced place of maleness and femaleness. So we have a real history of warriors, and if we look back at the model that most of us know about in ancient Greece, there were whole armies of men who were lovers, and the Greeks felt that if you fought beside your lover, that you would be a much better warrior, that the power of love brought together in this power of war would animate you to really be victorious. And I forget who said it, that an army of lovers will never be defeated, but this is a piece of culture that comes to us from ancient Greece. And so the coming back to this, I think, has the danger of our going so far in the opposite way, in reaction into maleness, that we reject the pieces of our femaleness. But somehow I think overall in the weave that as we claim the warrior energy, we will be able much more bravely to stand in the world and to shed the last pieces of our victimhood. We have the capacity to introduce to all men a very powerful and at the same time nurture and sense of what it means to be a man that's not about rape, that's not about pillage, that's not about violence. So I think that as we own a level of warriorness, we have a model of compassionate protectiveness that we can also offer to straight men who are struggling in a very deep way with what it means for them to be warriors.
What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
You short enough for you?
Not yet.
I don't think so.
Being gay is difficult because a lot of times you are excluded from lots of things that you should not be excluded from, relationships and those kinds of things. That can be difficult, but life can be lonely. Life can be lonely for straight people too. And you have to be able to deal with the loneliness as well as the wonderful relationships. And I have a lot of strength to deal with both.
I think it makes me different because I'm standing on the outside and I can see their world a lot clearer than they can because they're on the inside. They've, through my childhood years, forced me to recognize first that I was different and now that I'm just me.
Is it a curse to be considered by society the worst thing that you can be? I suppose that is a kind of curse to be an outlaw, to be completely looked down upon by some people as the absolute worst that you can be. But for me, the blessings far outweigh the curses.
We're an incredibly strong people. We've lived through several thousand years of discrimination, punishment, death, threat of being locked up, institutionalized, murdered, killed. Any street that you walk down, you always are aware, at least where I live, of the threat of violence. And I don't know how many other men could live with this constant pressure and still flourish to a reasonable extent, make art, make music, go about your life, fall in love. We are an incredibly powerful people, and I don't know, and I'm not saying this in a biased way, that straight men could live with the kind of pressure that we live under. And I think it would be really interesting as an experiment to have a sort of like a week of flipping everything over, where straight men got to be the victims for a week of incredible bias and heterophobia constantly directed at them. I think they'd crack up. I think the power that we have to be in touch with our emotions, even if sometimes we get lost in them, and if some of us don't still block them out, there's a way, I mean, because there is a balance of male-femaleness in us that allows us to process what we're going through so that we don't crack, and I think that's an incredible power.
I was fired from a job because I was gay. I had roommates desert me because I was gay. I had all kinds of things happen to me that happen to a lot of gay people. Family conflicts, on and on and on.
I'm in corporate life, and since I've come out, I'm noted as being very different because I don't do golf and I don't talk about my investments. I socialize at things I enjoy doing. I'm just myself. About 3 years ago, the process of coming out came into focus when I just said to myself, it's okay to be myself. I don't have to pretend to be somebody else. And that's been very liberating, but in some ways it's made my corporate life more difficult.
It still hurts when somebody else back it.
homosexuals are a stigmatized population, and we carry stigma. We carry the mark of our oppressor. And stigma is something that runs so deep in people, in oppressed people, that they are tricked into believing from the inside out that it is true. And that is the nature of internalized homophobia and internalized heterosexism.
I could be black, I could be a woman, I could be a member of a non-accepted ethnic group in this country. If I were in those situations, and maybe those people also are experiencing the fact that they have to look over their shoulder a lot. I experience that as a gay person. I have to be aware of my surroundings. I have to be sometimes strategic about what I say, for fear not so much of intellectual violence, because I think I can handle that, but of physical violence.
I think that one of the reasons, or one of the purposes that we as gay people have is to educate the 90% out there, is that you don't have to do it that way. You really don't have to do it that way. You don't have to kill yourself and everybody else in competition. You don't have to go to war. You know, that you can be delighted in each other's company, that there can be a certain ease and pleasure that many heterosexual men certainly don't feel when they're in the company of their own gender. They have prescribed rituals. They talk about sports, they talk about business, they talk about politics, and always, with the edge of being right. There's this big thing about being right, and being, that kind of addiction to being right is just basically a symptom of profound loneliness.
I value the ability to be sort of separate from everybody else. So it was painful for a long time. But it's sort of like not a blessing or curse, it just is. I mean, it's part of me. It's like, so oak trees, do they complain about having scaly bark,
The gay men, the gay women in our culture supply things that help keep the whole culture happy. And that if we weren't there, the world wouldn't be as beautiful, it wouldn't be as soft, we wouldn't have as much poetry, we wouldn't have as much art.
I tried to live my life pretending to be straight until I was 45 years old. The transition has been extremely difficult for me with my family, my corporation, the religion, internal homophobia. But I'm to the point now that if there was a quick fix to where I could be straight, I wouldn't even consider it.
I used to think that if that changing my sexual orientation or being heterosexual would be like chopping off an arm or losing a leg or something, but it's really more than that. It would be like losing my circulatory system or something. I mean, it's not losing a part of me, it's losing one of the most vital parts of me, something I couldn't live without.
Next to my soul and my creative life, being gay is the greatest gift that I've got, because it's allowed me to recognize my difference in a world that wants me to see only sameness.
The straight people, for the most part, don't know they're oppressed. So where I come from is becoming free of that oppression. And from their points of view, it looks like that what I'm making my life about has to do with my sexuality. And because they're oppressed and they don't know that.
That, there are places other than heaven and hell.
All Sixth World people are weavers between different tribes and different societies, different people, different religions, different nations, because we come from every different race, religion, color, and yet we are a people. I think one of the things that we do is we hold a very clear model for the emergence of a global consciousness and a real sense of one humanity, because we in our communities learn to live with each other with varying degrees of success in the midst of incredible diversity and still say, yes, we are a people, yes, we are a tribe. We hold this model for everyone. But we come from, for the most part, families that are not our immediate ancestors. Our gay ancestors live in the tribe that we discover. And this is part of our strength, and I think it's also part of our sorrow, because I know as a child who was raised in a Jewish family, I was told the stories of my ancestors, the stories of my people. No one was there to tell me the stories of my gay history and my gay forebears. And as we create a stronger culture, there will be people to go to tell us those stories.
There's coming out and then there's coming in. And I think that a lot of people come out. You know, they move from being a homosexual to being a gay person, but a lot of gay people live in relative isolation.
We're so accustomed to the expression coming out. What interests me very much more is the sense of coming in. Most of us are not raised by gay parents. We always will have this rite of passage in which we step away from the community that raised us and come into our own tribe of men who love men. And my vision of the future is that there will be established communities that young men could come to sit in council with elders of many, many, many generations, somewhat older than them, much older than them, grandfathers, great-grandfathers, who have an incredible wealth of history, so that 20 years from now, old men could sit around and say, this is what it was like in the days of Stonewall. This is what it was like in the last century. It's now the 21st century. It was very different then. But these are the things that I have learned along the way that are true about who we are as a people.
There probably have been other times and other places where there has been a gay men's culture. But I don't think that there's been anything like this, you know, in civilization as we know it.
I think that gay men will continue, as they have for a long time, to provide the culture with an understanding of itself.
We're discovering together that we're more than all the old definitions, and that we have an essence of ourselves that is different and an integral part of this planet and healing this planet.
I have a vision for us to make a contribution in this society, for people to be free, to know themselves, to be who they are, in a way that can also be respectful and enhance other people's ability to be free.
I hope to see, you know, on a larger scale, you know, the spokespeople for the gay community coming forth.
I think that one of the most important visions I have is about the legacy of leaving something for gay men to come into, that there's not the fear, the shame, and the guilt about being a gay man.
I would like to see the division between the black and white gay communities diminish. I know that's going to be a process, it cannot be an event, but I would like to participate actively in making that or helping that to happen.
I think the vision I have is that someday there won't be such a term as gay. That there won't be such a term as heterosexual. That we will all be just ourselves.
We're important. We are very important. I hope I'd like to be alive at a time when we're cherished and valued.
Every family, when they have one of those children, when they have a fairy child, they know they have it by age 5 or 6 or 7. They all know. Every family knows. And I look forward to the day when a family who has one of those will feel like it has one of those.
I like what Harry Hayes said when I heard him speak several years ago at a gay spirituality conference in North Carolina about the sense of the survival of a negative trait that he picked up from Sir Julian Huxley, that no negative trait survives in the biological gene pool if it doesn't in some way serve the people through time. I think what Harry was saying is that how can this possibly be a negative trait if it's survived since the beginning of time? I think his words were really inviting us to reframe any perception we have that it was negative and look at it in the way that the sociobiologists do, that this is clearly a very positive trait because it shows up everywhere.
I think it's theoretically possible as a Jew to exterminate all the Jews in the world. You know, you could do that. You could track down all the Jews and kill them. You know, Hitler could have been successful, and there could be a planet Earth with no Jews. You know, maybe some people with, you know, very distant, you know, Jewish ancestors. That's possible. You could eliminate all the gypsies. You could eliminate all the black people on the planet. You could, you know, wipe out, you know, all people of African descent or Asian or whatever, you can't get rid of us, because we're the children of all the world. And you could eliminate a whole generation. You could put us, they could come in the morning and lock us all up in a concentration camp, but, right out there, in the next hamlet down the road, over in Highlands, people will be giving birth to gay and lesbian babies.
It takes a lot of balls to dress up in a dress.